2. The science of right is a part of philosophy. It has therefore to develop the idea, which is the reason within an object, Gegenstand, out of the concept. Or what comes to the same thing, it must observe the proper immanent development of thing, Sake, itself. As a part of philosophy, it has a determinate starting point, which is the result and truth of what preceded it, and what preceded it is the so-called proof of that result. Hence the concept of right, so far as its coming into being is concerned, falls outside the science of right. Its deduction is presupposed here and is to be taken as given. Addition G. Philosophy forms a circle. It has an initial and immediate point, for it must begin somewhere, a point which is not demonstrated and is not a result, but the starting point of philosophy is immediately relative, for it must appear at another endpoint as a result. Philosophy is a sequence which is not suspended in midair. It does not begin immediately, but is rounded off within itself. According to the formal, non-philosophical method of the sciences, the first thing which is sought and required, at least for the sake of external scientific form, is the definition. The positive science of right cannot be much concerned with this, however, since its chief aim is to state what is right and legal, rectens, that is, what the particular legal determinations are. This is the reason for the warning, omnis definitio in iore civili periculosa. And in fact, the more incoherent the internally contradictory the determinations of a system of right are, the less possible it would be to make definitions within it, for definitions should contain universal determinations, but in the present context, these would immediately make the contradictory element, in this case what is unjust, das Unrechtliche, visible in all its nakedness. Thus in Roman law, das römische Recht, for example, no definition of a human being would be possible, for the slave could not be subsumed under it. Indeed, the status, Stand, of the slave does violence to that concept. The definitions of property and proprietor would seem equally hazardous in many situations, but the deduction of the definition may perhaps be reached by means of etymology, or chiefly by abstraction from particular cases, so that it is ultimately based on the feelings and ideas, Vorstellung, of human beings. The correctness of the definition is then made to depend on its agreement with prevailing ideas, Vorstellungen. This method leaves out of account what is alone essential to science, with regard to content, the necessity of the thing, Sake, in and for itself, in this case of right, and with regard to form, the nature of the concept. In philosophical cognition, on the other hand, the chief concern is the necessity of a concept, and the route by which it has become a result is its proof and deduction. Thus, given that its content is necessary for itself, the second step is to look around for what corresponds to it in our ideas, Vorstellungen, and language. But this concept as it is for itself is, in its truth, may not only be different from our representation, Vorstellung, of it. The two must also differ in their form and shape. If, however, the representation is not also false in its content, the concept may well be shown to be contained in it, and present in essence within it. That is, the representation may be raised to the form of the concept, but it is so far from being the measure and criterion of the concept which is necessary and true for itself, that it must rather derive its truth from the concept, and recognize and correct itself with the help of the latter. But if, on the other hand, the former manner of cognition with its formal definitions, inferences, proofs, and the like, has now virtually disappeared, the other mode which has replaced it is a bad substitute, that is, ideas in general, and hence also the idea of right and its further determinations, are taken up and asserted in immediate fashion as facts of consciousness, and our natural or intensified feelings, our own heart and enthusiasm, are made the source of right. If this is the most convenient method of all, it is also the least philosophical, not to mention here other aspects of this view which has immediate relevance, Beziehung, to action and not just to cognition, whereas the first admittedly formal method does at least require the form of the concept in its definitions and the form of necessary cognition in its proofs. The mode of immediate consciousness and feeling makes the subjectivity, contingency, and arbitrariness of knowledge into its principle. A familiarity with the nature of scientific procedure in philosophy, as expounded in philosophical logic, is here presupposed.